In our last video, Hank and I talked about functions that don't return anything, or void functions, and we used a sandwich analogy to go through all the ways that functions are useful. We're going to continue on this analogy, making a sandwich, but instead we're going to use it to talk about arguments and parameters. And if-else statements. So let's go ahead and think about what we did last time. We made a veggie sandwich, and then we would print out all the parts of the veggie sandwich and it would come up on our web page. But we can only make specific types of sandwiches, like peanut butter sandwiches and veggie sandwiches. But when we use arguments and parameters, we can make a certain type of sandwich. So let's talk about what arguments versus parameters are. So when you make a function, in between those parentheses, you can either leave it empty, which means you would have no parameters, or you can put values inside it. So let's go ahead and make a sandwich using parameters. So we're going to say function make sandwich. But instead of leaving these parentheses empty, we can put parameters in there so that when you call this function, you can tell the function what you want to put in your sandwich. So when you're making this make sandwich function, you can say in those parentheses what your parameter type is going to be and what you're going to call that variable after you've passed in the argument. So we'll say ingredient is going to be of type string. And that goes in those parentheses there. And we're just going to have one parameter in this function just to keep things simple for now. So that means it's going to be a one ingredient sandwich that we're making. So we close that parentheses, we put the semicolon, put that word void because this function is not going to return anything. And then we're going to do our open curly brace and we can enter that function. So let's go ahead and, for starters, just add a print statement here. And all we're going to say is print ingredient. So we're going to go ahead and call make sandwich, and we'll make tomato our argument, which means we put it in those parentheses when we do the function call. So now let's trace through what happens here. So tomato goes over to make sandwich, and it's almost like we're declaring that variable right now. We're declaring that ingredient variable. So it's like the computer is saying let ingredient be of type string and have that equal to tomato. So now, when we say print ingredient, tomato is what's going to be printed. So let's have this actually make our one ingredient sandwich now. So let's get rid of that print statement and think about what the first thing that we have to have in every sandwich is, and that's bread. So we'll just go ahead and call our bread function. Great, and remember we have that bread, peanut butter, jelly, lettuce, tomato, we have all those functions in our food function pantry that we made in our last video. Now we want to add our one ingredient in between those slices of bread. So we have to ask what the argument that we passed in was. This is where if then else statements come in. So we're going to use this keyword if, and after it we're going to have parentheses, a lot of parentheses in this video. So we're going to say if ingredient equals tomato, and remember we use a triple equal sign to indicate that equality. We ask if it equals tomato, then we can close those parentheses and open up brackets, and if that's true, if ingredient equals tomato evaluates to true, then the computer will go inside and do what's in these brackets. And what we want it to do is we want it to call our tomato function. But we want to ask if it equals the other ingredients. So we're also going to ask if ingredient equals peanut butter, jelly, lettuce, and yeah, all of those. We're going to also have separate if statements for all of those. Great, so they're all going to look pretty similar. And they look just like this, with one for each of our ingredients. And then we're just going to do one more bread call at the end to finish off our sandwich. Great, so let's see what happens now when we call make sandwich with tomato. We have our bread, tomato, and bread. Perfect. So Hank and I have been using our make sandwich function so much that we ran out of all of our ingredients except for tomato and lettuce. So we're going to change this function so that only the arguments tomato or lettuce will make a sandwich with lettuce or tomato in it. If you pass in any other argument into our new make sandwich function, it's just going to make you bread on bread. Not very tasty. So how do we change this? We're going to use an if-else statement. So we're going to go in our function and ask if ingredient equals tomato, just like we had done before, call tomato. Then after that closing bracket, we're going to say else if. So this is basically a way to make two if statements kind of flow together. So we're saying if tomato, do this, else if ingredient equals lettuce, call lettuce, closing bracket after that, and then all you have to say for any other argument that could be passed in is just the word else, and you don't need parentheses here because we're just saying anything else, do this last bracket. And we go inside those last brackets, and we need to tell the person using our function, sorry, we don't have that argument that you passed in because we only have lettuce and tomato. So we're just gonna use a print statement and say print, sorry, we don't have ingredient. And this is really cool. You can use that parameter, which you can use that term ingredient in a string, just like that. So let's go ahead and call make sandwich with lettuce. And we have our lettuce sandwich, but let's call make sandwich with peanut butter. And that's going to print, sorry, we don't have peanut butter.